Douglas Haig was one of the most controversial army marshals in the World War I era. Nicknamed Butcher Haig by many of the soldiers under his command, he was known for his extremely controversial tactics and his recorded breakthroughs in the Battle of the Somme, which played a major role in achieving the victory for the Allied side in World War I. However, to begin his fascinating story, we must start from the beginning. Douglas Haig was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, to an upper-class family. He was the last child of 11 and his dad owned a large whiskey distillery, being very wealthy, which allowed Douglas Haig to study at many universities and enjoy many elitist sports, always loving polo. Following in his father's footsteps, who was a colonial in the British Army, Douglas Haig would graduate in 1883 at the Royal Military College at Sandhurst, earning a military certificate. During his early years in the military, Haig served in the Sudanese campaign as well as the Second Boer War in South Africa, in which his knack for leadership and military abilities were quickly noticed, as he was promoted quickly from an overseas adjutant to a well-respected and formal general officer before World War I broke out. The wealth of his family, respect from superiors, and hard work of serving the British Army is what allowed for Haig to become Field Marshal in World War I. Before World War I, Douglas Haig had a high level of military knowledge, knowing before the war started that the Central Powers would attack the Allies, theorizing, Germany is now ready, we are told, to give all we want in these respects. Although correct about this thesis, it was far too late to prepare as Germany attacked a nearby and close ally of the British, France, in August 1914. During this time, Haig served as leader of the British Expeditionary Force, leading his newfound army towards northern France to help alleviate the pressure Germany placed on the left wing of the French line. At the start of World War I, Britain had a relatively small army. However, it grew rapidly and Haig found himself the leading marshal after succeeding Sir John and becoming the new commander-in-chief of the British Expeditionary Force, leading millions of soldiers in the largest offensive at the Somme. His role was challenging as not only Haig but most generals in World War I had never led such large, complex forces before, with many challenges ahead such as mutinies, lack of munitions, and vying for leadership with the French. Before the battle, the French army were desperately defending the town of Somme, being a very important site of great cultural significance for the French. As German armies were approaching the Somme and close by city Verdun, fierce battling between French and German soldiers was approaching breaking point. This immediately led French Brigade Commander Joseph Joffre to pressure Haig to create an offensive at the Somme. This offensive would distract the Germans as they desperately tried to defend the oncoming British forces. Although Haig was reluctant at first about the Somme offensive and concerned about the large bloodshed that would occur in pushing through the very fortified German trenches, Douglas Haig agreed and had a plan to push through. Otherwise, not starting the offensive would lead to weakened diplomatic ties with the French army and risk him losing his rank. Before the Battle of Somme, although men and supplies were low, a newly British-trained division consisting of 750,000 men were prepared 2 years prior and ready to be sent to fight at the Battle of the Somme. Before the men pushed forward, Haig ordered a 7-day preliminary artillery bombardment on German lines to try and break the sophisticated and deeply rooted German trench defences and artillery. In the 7 days alone, 1.5 million artillery shells were fired. Haig believed that after this immense bombing, passing no man's land to infiltrate German trenches would be easy to achieve. Haig instructed his soldiers to prepare for a rapid advance. However, many of the artillery shells were shrapnel, having minimal impact on the Germans. On top of this, 30% of all the shells fired even failed to explode, resulting in the crucial German artillery surviving the attack before the British men charged in. This resulted in bloodbath, contrary to the easy sweep of the German lines following the shellings Haig expected. It was July 1st when Haig ordered his soldiers to push through. Having thought previously the Germans were shattered and with the British soldiers being inexperienced, Haig ordered the British soldiers to march in a straight line formation towards the German defences that were unknowingly in perfect condition and ready for the British to arrive. With most of the German machine guns, artillery and barbed wire still intact, the British were massacred, resulting in 57,000 casualties in 1 day, marking the bloodiest day of military death in British history. Although these astounding losses made the idea of continuing the offensive very daunting, it could not be stopped as the French were already still heavily engaged in Verdun. Furthermore, Haig's attitude towards the losses was unrelenting, as he insisted upon the notion, quoting, "Every last man should be sent to fight for success." Although the main offensive was brutal for both the British and Germans, there was no respite as this attritional style of fighting became more frequent. Haig's British forces would launch huge offensives that provoked equally large and vicious counterattacks from the Germans, resulting in a long bloodbath. This attritional style of fighting continued for months, with small attacks and subtle gains for both sides. However, Haig's front saw the implementation of a famous vehicular weapon resonant towards modern-day war equipment, the tank, a large armoured vehicle plated in tough materials such as steel or titanium, and armed with a turret that uses explosive shells to fire and cause mass destruction. With the use of the tanks supporting the British infantry under Haig's command, on the 15th of September, over the course of one day, the British forces pushed forwards 2,286 metres, paving the way for the breaking of the Hindenburg Line. Although successful, the British would need to maintain defences and keep the pressure on the Germans so as not to lose their advancements so far. Haig believed that if pressure was maintained, the German forces would ultimately collapse. Following this logic, after preparing for another major attack, on the 26th of September, Haig's forces attacked the Fievepool Ridge to remove another crucial tactical position from the Germans. After succeeding in the attack on October 10th, the final act of the offensive of Somme would begin at the Anchor River, with British Navy at this point arriving in the river and the British soldiers safely crossing the river, allowing for naval bombardment on German defences to start, finishing the battle as the Germans retreated. This battle resulted in all of Somme being recaptured and protected, and an additional 32 kilometers of French land being recaptured, with the British and French lines now only 5 kilometers within German core cities. This effectively allowed for the next 2 years of the war to be fought against the German heartland, resulting in significant damage towards the Hindenburg Line, breaking on the 29th of September, with Germany losing the war in the same year only months later in November, with the war forever remaining remarkable and resonant to modern-day society. Douglas Haig would be famed at the time as a British hero who led the British Expeditionary Force to victory. From Douglas Haig's controversial and high casualty counts, arguments to this day would continue over whether he was morally corrupt in his tactics, or if the conditions of World War I forced this to happen, causing significant impacts on modern-day war tactics. Nevertheless, after his time in the British Army, Douglas Haig would start a charity aimed towards veteran soldiers, funding and helping them as they lived their new lives, showing his care and compassion for helping his men. To this day, Haig's story is remarkable for his major breakthroughs in World War I, especially in the Battle of Somme, and is forever resonant, especially when he was the first commander to use tanks in battle, paving the way for World War II, where many tanks and other new vehicles evolved from the tank would be used to create the bloodiest war in history. Despite all the controversial debates, in 1929, when Douglas Haig would pass away, tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians alike would mourn their loss of Britain's World War I leading commander.